Greetings, this is Jim Lindsay. This is a short video to tell you some things about doing internet research. This topic is covered in your textbook in Chapter 8, and what you're about to see here is basically a subset of stuff that I've actually been teaching a long time that I got from the University of California, Berkeley, from Joe Barker and John Coopersmith. I tailored a presentation to basically fit my needs that I found that they had done, and this is a really condensed version of just one part of it. And so what I'd like to show you is hopefully going to be really helpful information very quickly for you about how to best use search engines. And what is a search engine? Well, search engines are basically websites, and at those websites on the server there's a computer program, and it has it has a bunch of indexed information for you that you can obviously search. That's why we call it a search engine. Examples would include the ones listed on your page, and in addition to those you have Bing. There are other types of websites that are very similar. They're not exactly search engines, but they're really similar. You have, for example, Dogpile.com, which is a meta search engine which basically reaches out to multiple search engines. You have directory sites such as Ask.com and a librarian's index, which is really good. And those two, like your subject directories, are basically they work the same way as far as like how you would use it to do a search for, let's say, a specific keyword, but in the background there's actually an expert of some sort. It's supposed to be a human expert which has gone through and vetted or looked at all the possible hits. And so what you're getting back from Ask.com or this librarian's index is a lot smaller set of hits, but they're all credible hits that you can use to especially if you're doing research. And so subject directories, they work as far as you and I are concerned. The user interface is the same as a search engine, but in the background they're actually a little bit better tools for research. But that's what a search engine is. How do these things work? Well, basically with a search engine, these things are automated, and there's software that the search engine websites use. The software is called a bot, B-O-T, like a robot. And the bots, or the spiders, are also called spiders. What they do is they are constantly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they are reading websites, and it's just going from link to link to link within at google.com or at bing.com or at Exelead or at Yahoo. You can tell the website that you want your website crawled or basically indexed, and at that point that basically puts your domain name into their queue, and then when their bots get time, they come and they crawl your page, or they read it. They look at every bit of text on there. They look at the images, and they're building an index. So when somebody does a search, the stuff that you have on your pages that got indexed will come up as a hit. And so that's how these things work. So you need to realize that there's a time delay between somebody putting something on a web page and it actually showing up as a hit in a search engine. If you're looking for stuff that's like right this minute, cutting edge, real time, you're not going to get that on a search engine, because search engines have to index, and then the index has to be processed, and then you get your hits. And so if you're looking for stuff that's like right this minute, there are probably better avenues for you. You should probably come up with a list of possible news sources or publications which are going to be really current, and then go directly to those places and check those, or set up some kind of RSS feed directly from those sites as opposed to going through search engines. So that's how a search engine works. Okay, next what I want to do is just real briefly is share some tips with you on how to best use these tools. This is really good information. What you're about to get, again, I've initially got this stuff from UC Berkeley, but I think this will kind of freak you out as like how good this information is. I'm just going to show you some slides initially, and you can get these slides from the Blackboard site. But after I say this, it's gonna make sense. Oh well, of course, that makes sense. But when you see it in action, it's like, wow, that's really great. Um, First of all, they want us to be thinking of specific terms. They want us to be putting in academic and professional terms, especially if you're doing research for a school. And the reason for that should make sense is basically, let's use that top example that's listed on the screen there. If you're trying to do a research paper about the War of 1812, War of 1812, the economic causes of it, that's a much better collection of keywords to do a search on as opposed to history. Because I'm sure you've done a search with a search engine and come back with like 5 gazillion hits, and you're like, well, what can I do with that? That's way too much, it's way too much information. I can't process all of that. Whereas this one right here would give you a much better collection of things to look at as opposed to this one. So thinking specifically, thinking academic and professional terms is really helpful. Now, what do we mean by academic professional terms? Well, you have some examples right there. Again, if you're trying to do, you've got like Genome Society and these terms right down in here, trying to pull in information about, if you're trying to do some sort of genetic research, by putting in academic and professional terms, you're basically going to get hits probably from journals or professional articles. And the reason that those are good is because, especially if you're writing research, you can cite those sources, and you have to cite your sources in order to not be plagiarizing, and those are good credible sources as opposed to just Jim Lindsay's crazy page, and Jim Lindsay's some crazy college instructor that likes to rant about things and writes on his blog all sorts of crazy talk. And so by using the academic and professional terms, you're probably going to pull in hits from places that you actually can use as academic and credible sources. Okay, let's get to the next tip, and this one is just worth the price of admission all by itself right here. Searching with a specific phrase. And you'll see, for example, I have Gary Ransdell, and we are dust in the wind. Or we are all just dust in the wind. I should have put that there. You'll notice that they're in quotation marks, and that makes a huge difference. So let me jump on over to to a search engine and show this to you. What those quotation marks do, you'll see that at the beginning and the end of the phrase, it makes it so that when you do a search, that whatever comes back has to have that exact phrase. When you just do a search for Gary Ransdell without the quotation marks, you're going to get hits for Gary Ransdell, the president of WKU, yes, but you're also going to get hits for like Gary Smith, Gary McMillan, or Susie Gary, anything with the word Gary in it. By putting the quotation marks around it, it makes it so it has to have that specific phrase. So let's go ahead and try that out. Okay, obviously I'm at the Google homepage. I'm going to do a search for Gary Ransdell. He, of course, is the president of Western Kentucky University. I'll hit enter, and it's going to come back with about 136 possible results. I don't know about you, but 136 possible results, that's a lot of results. I don't have time to read 136,000 anything. And so what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to put quotation marks at the beginning and the end of that, and then hit enter to do my search. And all of a sudden it dropped down to 14,600 things. That's still way too many, but every single hit that came back here is going to have Gary Ransdell in it. And so that's a really great way to make your searches better. Anything that's a phrase, a two-word phrase, put it in quotation marks. It's going to specify that exact phrase has to be there. Okay, so you can also exclude or include words. You'll see, for example, with the plus sign and the negative sign in front of terms, you can include or exclude things. So in this case, they're looking for some information about proliferation, but not nuclear proliferation. So the proliferation of everything else besides nuclear stuff. In this case, they're looking like the Bush legacy. In that case, I would assume they're talking about like the Bush presidential family legacy plus environment, so everything including environment. And so you can try out the plus and negative sign in front of words in your searches. These next two, I want to show you this stuff right here. Note these weird looking things like in title colon and then hybrid, all in title colon hybrid mileage. And so what they're talking about title here is basically when you open a web page, up at the top there's a title of that page. The author of that page gets to name it. And so typically they're going to name stuff so that the pages are named, appropriately for whatever the content is. And so in this case, they're looking for like hybrid kind of cars. And so by including hybrid or hybrid mileage in the title of the page itself, they're going to get pages that are appropriate to their research. Down here, this is really awesome stuff, where it says site colon and then the name of a domain name. And in this one, site colon edu is looking for just school websites, and then they're looking for a specific phrase of global warming. And so these are very specific searches, and so these are really great for helping you get good results. Let's go ahead and try this out. Okay, so I'm back in Google, and you'll see I have the 14,600 hits for the search for Gary Ransdell in quotation marks. What I'm going to do, I'm going to add that site colon wku.edu to the end of it. And oh, I forgot. Make sure I got a period and not a comma there. But when I do this search this time, you'll see it's dropped down all the way to 1,490. And so we've gone from like 16,000, I've forgotten what the total was in the very beginning, but we've dropped down, dramatically down to, this is still too many, 1,490. I don't have time to read that many things, but I know that everything I'm looking at here includes that exact phrase, Gary Ransdell, and it's coming from the wku.edu website. You'll see, as you look at all these hits here, they're coming from wku.edu, wku.edu, and so really cool help and helpful hit. Now let me add another thing here, and you're going to see it on the next slide, but it's basically file type. And when you include the keyword basically file type colon, you can then specify exactly what kind of file you're looking for. So let's say I want PowerPoint presentations. So if I'm going to include PPT, because file extensions are, they specify whether something's a PowerPoint presentation or a Word document or an Excel file or a web page, whatever. So by including this one, I'm going to get the exact phrase Gary Ransdell from the wku.edu website, and specifically it's a PowerPoint presentation. Let's see what I get. And I'm down to 1. And so I've gone from 16,000 down to 1. And if I look at this, this is going to be a PowerPoint presentation from the WKU site, and in this case it was talking about Gary Ransdell Hall, and so that's exactly what I asked for. And again, I pared it down from 16,000 down to 1 in just 3 searches, and so that's a really helpful, I think, thing to know about. And so there's that file type I showed you just a second ago. You can define things, like if you're looking for definitions to words, define colon pixel, and so on. This is looking for a specific phrase of due diligence. If you're looking like for legal stuff, really cool tips to know. Now, the last part of this presentation, I'm just going to cover this very, very quickly. But basically, once you get a hit and you look at a hit from a search engine, realize that what you get back as a search engine hit could be completely wrong. That the information provided in that web page could be completely, totally false, a lie, incorrect, inaccurate, because anybody can put up a web page. I could put up an entire website about how to treat some terrible disease, and how at the Lindsay Institute for so-and-so, how we've cured 100% of people of this terrible disease. And I don't know anything about that. I mean, I'm just, I'm just a guy that knows how to make web pages, but I can put that site out there, and if somebody wanders into that site, they if they have that disease and they're really desperate, they might fall for my scam, and I might be able to get a bunch of money out of them by conning them. Realize that anybody can put up a site, and so you need to evaluate whatever you find especially through a search engine, very critically. The rest of this presentation basically has tips for you what to look for. You can, by following these tips, you can basically discern, is this a person's web page, or is this actually a legitimate website that's coming from someplace where people know what they're talking about. If you're doing research on things like diseases, well, go to like organizations that actually specialize in that, like the Center for Disease Control. Like do like go for cdc.gov, and restrict your site to cdc.gov and go from there, as opposed to like the Jim Lindsay site. These tips here, telling how to tell whether something is a personal page or an actual legitimate page, really helpful information. That character is kind of hard to read. That's the tilde symbol, just like if you took Spanish, like you put like that tilde over an "and," how it changes the sound of it. A lot of personal web pages, especially at universities, will include that tilde symbol, and at Western we had that for a really long time, and we got rid of it and went to the people.wku.edu server, but that's what that character is right there, the tilde symbol. This slide, it contains additional information to help you read this slide. Think about the recommendations here. They're going to help you evaluate whether the content you found is actually legitimate or not. And then lastly, we've got as a list here, do some detective work. There's a website called alexa.com, and if you visit alexa.com, I'll jump in here, click on that. What alexa.com does, it's basically a website where you can start to do some background checking about whether about a website. So let me, for example, put in here, I'm going to put in wku.edu, and when I do a search for that, it's going to say, okay, here's some information about wku.edu. It takes a second to populate, but basically as you go through here, it'll tell you that let's let it come up. Hang on one second. Okay, it populated now. So it's telling me that the people that visit this site, percentage-wise, typically come from these particular countries: United States, India, France, Indonesia. Are there other people? Sure, there are other people, but the vast majority of people visiting this site come from those locations. It talks about the things that they're searching for. As you scroll down to the bottom of it, they give you demographic information, like who's actually using this site, female versus male, their education levels, and where they're browsing from. It gives you information about who owns the site. And so why is that helpful? Well, again, if you're doing research and you want to base your reputation based on what you're reading from this site, if you come here and there's no information, that's one indicator that not a lot of people visit this site. It's not in Alexa. Two, if you get in here and it says it's from the Jim Lindsay, it's from Jim Lindsay, and he's just a guy. He's not actually an expert in anything. That can give you some information like, well, maybe I shouldn't really trust this. Let me corroborate this with someone, all these other things. So this is a really cool site. Again, it's called alexa.com, and that comes from, you'll see that link right there. So be a detective when you're doing research, because what you put out there, you want it to be accurate, and by following these tips that we've given to you, you should be able to discern whether things are correct or not. And there's the summary. Again, thanks to Joe Barker and John Coopersmith. This is really good information. I hope that it will help you out, and have a good day.